As I was making my way through the Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb, there was one comment that I kept seeing come up over and over again. If you love Farseer this much, just wait until you get to Liveship. Well, recently I finished Ship of Magic, Book 1 of the Liveship Traders Trilogy, and what did I think? Let's talk about it. Hello everyone, welcome back to Tall Guy Reads. My name is Alex, and yes, today we are going to be talking about and reviewing Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, Book 1 of the Liveship Traders Trilogy, and this follows the Farseer Trilogy chronologically, but is entirely its own story. And right out of the gate, I want to say that Ship of Magic is probably my favorite Robin Hobb novel yet, which is crazy because I absolutely love the Farseer Trilogy, but I just felt that this book took everything I love about Robin Hobb's writing and combined it with a multi-POV cast, a larger cast of characters, a seemingly grander plot, and just more of everything, and I absolutely loved it. But before we start talking about all of that though, what is this book even about? Well, at its core, this is a giant family drama that's set against a backdrop of Bingtown and the Cursed Shores filled with sentient ships, pirates, and adventure. But it's also significantly more than that. Bingtown is a hub of exotic trade and home to a merchant nobility famed for its live ships. Rare vessels carved from wizard wood which ripen magically into sentient awareness after 3 generations of the ship's owners die on board. Now the fortunes of one of Bingtown's oldest families rest on the newly awakened live ship Vivacia. For Althea Vestrit, the ship is her rightful legacy. For Althea's young nephew, Wintro, wrenched from his religious studies and forced to serve aboard the ship, the Vivacia is a life sentence. But the fate of the ship and the Vestrits may ultimately lie in the hands of an outsider, the ruthless buccaneer Captain Kennett, who plans to seize power over the Pirate Isles by capturing a live ship and bending it to his will. Ship of Magic is a complex family drama and character exploration filled to the brim with unmet expectations, conflicting ambitions, and tons of magical and mystical intrigue, while also looping in plenty of commentary on slavery, class, gender roles, and more. It is the beginning of what truly feels like an incredibly epic trilogy that separates itself from Farseer completely, but also maintains the core of what makes Robin Hobb's writing so special. And I think the best place to start with this discussion of Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb is to first talk about the writing style, because unlike the Farseer Trilogy, which is a first-person past tense chronicle of Fitzchivalry Farseer, this is a third-person multi-POV epic fantasy story, and you notice it instantly. Now, multi-POV stories are usually my favorite. I find that when they're done really well, they allow you basically an unmatched glimpse at all the different characters' reasons for doing what they're doing, and allows you to get inside the head of all of your characters, see what drives them, see what their ambitions are, and see what their thought process is as they make decisions that they're making that impact the story overall. And as a result, this allows a lot of the characters to feel much more complex, much more fleshed out, and much more gray, and not as black or white or, good or evil or anything like that. That being said though, I definitely was a little bit hesitant moving into Ship of Magic from the first person story that we got in Farseer, because I was so used to that first person narrative structure and just seeing the whole world through Fitz's eyes, and it reminded me of why I love first person narratives when they're done really well. And I think the Farseer Trilogy and Robin Hobb's first person writing with Fitzchivalry Farseer is some of the best first-person writing that I've ever read. And as a result, moving away from that made me a little bit nervous. And it definitely did take me probably about 150, 200 pages just to get my bearings in Ship of Magic when it came to, who was who, how the POVs were going to switch from one to another, and how we were going to move through the story. But once I did, I was hooked. I honestly found that by switching the narrative structure to multi-POV, Robin Hobb gave herself significantly more room to expand upon what she did so well in the Farseer books, which was character development and character perspective control. And this quickly brings me to talk about what truly separates Ship of Magic from a lot of other fantasy books that I've read lately: the characters. Ship of Magic introduced us to an entirely new cast of characters that quickly grew into becoming these well-realized, well-fleshed out, individually distinct in their flaws and their weaknesses and their strengths, that you almost couldn't help but be captivated by all of these characters in one way or another, positively or negatively. And the main group of characters that we follow in Ship of Magic that primarily drive the plot are the members of the Vestrit family. And honestly, on my first read through of this book, I found them to be incredibly dysfunctional, but not in a way that's annoying to read about or anything like that. Actually, it was quite the opposite. I found them to be incredibly engaging and realistic. Every single scene between members of this family were so engaging because the dialogue and the conflict between them was so dramatic and the tension was so strong, and I couldn't take my eyes away from the page when any of these characters from this family were interacting with each other. One of the biggest recurring situations that a lot of characters find themselves in this book specifically, including members of the Vesher family, are the fact that they have a set of expectations that go unmet, and they're forced to redirect their actions and their mindset and potentially their entire lives in order to account for this. And two incredibly good examples of this in this book specifically are Althea and Wintrow, and I enjoyed both of their storylines very much while reading this book, but Wintrow easily became my favorite character in this book. As the son of Kevria, who is Althea's sister, and Kyle, Wintrow had some of the biggest character development out of all the characters in this entire book because he's essentially caught between being what he wants to be in life and doing what he wants to do and what his father wants him to do. And as a result, he's put in a number of situations that force him to change and grow and react and adapt positively or negatively that totally change his character from where he is at the beginning of the book to where he is at the end of the book. And overall with Wintrow's storyline, I found it to be the most compelling out of all the characters in this book. And I think that's so surprising to me because at the beginning of Ship of Magic, I didn't really feel engaged or connected to Wintrow whatsoever. But after a couple hundred pages, I found myself being more and more acclimated to all the characters in the book, and I found myself attaching myself more to Wintrow as we moved on in the story. On that note, let's bring up the big one. Kyle. Yes, if you have heard anything about the Liveship Traders Trilogy, it's most likely that you have heard that Kyle is one of the most hateable villains in all of fantasy. And yeah, I would have to agree after reading Ship of Magic because I found it so hard not to hate this guy. He is just such an angry individual. He's arrogant, he's selfish, he's racist, classist, abusive, and he would let his personal ambitions and where he thinks he deserves to be and where he thinks his family deserves to be trump everything else. That being said though, I actually don't think Kyle is a one-note villain whatsoever, and I actually think he's rather complex because if I take a step back and take a look at all the decisions that he made in Ship of Magic, I can quickly see that, they align with his worldview. They align with what he values, who he values, where he wants his family to be, where he wants to be in the future. And even though I don't agree with his worldview at all, I definitely see that, everything that he does lines up with it and aligns up with his character. But what separates himself from being just this angry individual and totally shifts him into being this really hateable villain are the methods that he takes to get there and pursue this worldview of his and who he's willing to hurt along the way. And this combination provides what a lot of people consider to be one of the most hateable villains in all of fantasy and who I would consider Robin Hobb's best written villain to date. Now, how could I even talk about Kyle being Robin Hobb's best written antagonist to date without bringing up another character? Captain Kennett, the pirate who is willing to do whatever it takes to make himself a legend. And this is probably the most intriguing character in this entire book for me because at the end of this book, I still don't know what to make of him. I don't know if I trust him. I don't even know if I like him, but he's so engaging. And I find that every time he's on the page, I'm just glued to it because I just want to know more about this mysterious character. And he's also very interesting because I can't tell if he's supposed to be a villain because yes, he has a lot of antagonistic qualities and he has so many questionable worldviews and he takes a lot of questionable actions that I don't agree with in this book. But all that being said, I can't tell if, he's a villain that's just going to get worse over time and you'll see and just read on, or if he's the type of villain that, that's what the world wants you to think is a villain. But as you kind of peel back the onion or peel back the layers of Kennett, you realize, no, he's much more complicated than that. And he's just actually nowhere near as heinous as someone like Kyle is. And this is a question that, I'm going to find out as we move on later in the Mad Ship and Ship of Destiny, and I'm really excited to just watch his character develop because I am so intrigued by his character and I just don't find him to be a villain. So even though I don't agree with a lot of his actions that he takes in Ship of Magic, I can't help but really enjoy my time reading his plotline. And overall, when it comes to the characters, I found that I just really enjoyed all of the characters in this book, and almost every single major character in Ship of Magic grew or changed in one way or the other. They changed from where they were at the beginning of the story to where they are at the end of the story, and they were put in a lot of situations and a lot of circumstances that forces them to adapt and react, and it was just so interesting to watch all of this happen. And as a result, this created and shifted them to becoming some of the most individually distinct, well-realized, well-fleshed out characters that I've read in fantasy in a long time. And I know we just talked a lot about Robin Hobb's character work and how she spends so much time focusing on the characters, But all of that doesn't mean that the plot was non-existent or anything like that. Actually, it was quite the opposite. Going into this book, one of the main things that I heard was that, it starts really slow and the plot really doesn't even appear until halfway through the book. And so you might be bored, but just give it time. You'll get attached and you'll find out the plot as you move on later in the book. I can see this somewhat because I can definitely see, the underlying plot isn't really there right from the start, but I was never bored whatsoever. I honestly thought some of the beginning of this book was some of the most engaging writing Hobb's done yet, because the character interactions and the dialogue between them was so gripping to me that I could not stop reading the book. And it didn't even matter that the actual underlying plot didn't really appear until a couple hundred pages into the story, because the character interactions and the character drama between them honestly felt like the heart of the story in this first book, and I was just so engaged every single moment that this was apparent on the page. That being said, though, the second half of Ship of Magic was incredible, and the ending was absolutely epic, and it made me so excited for the next two books because, man, the payoff that we got after reading hundreds and hundreds of pages of character development and character growth and build was so good and so worth it. And it was just such a perfect example of what Robin Hobb does so well. So yes, while a lot of people recognize that she takes her time developing these characters, the payoff is so worth it because, if she didn't take the time to develop those characters in the first half of this book, the ending might not land as well as it did. And for me, I thought it was fantastic and worth every single minute that we spent with the characters developing them in the first half of this book. And I was just so engaged in every single minute of the last 200 pages of this book, and I could not wait to find out what was going to happen next, and it made me so excited to read Mad Ship and Ship of Destiny. Now, moving on to the setting, one of my favorite settings in all of fiction and fantasy is a nautical setting, and I love this so much in real life, so it's no surprise that this translates to the type of fiction or fantasy that I'm reading. But overall, I went into Liveship Traders expecting this to be a nautical fantasy that takes place, all on the open sea. And I was actually surprised that Ship of Magic doesn't. A lot of it takes place, in Bingtown and in these other cities and on the docked ships. And that's totally fine because for me, I don't have a hard time visualizing things while I read, but I definitely am not as good as I would like to be at visualizing characters and details of cities and streets and stuff like that while I'm reading a book. However, the way Bingtown's described in Ship of Magic had me so engaged, and I could visualize everything, at least somewhat. I could visualize the streets, the shops, the characters that were in this town, like the taverns, who was wearing what. It was just so well described, and Robin Hobb isn't overly descriptive at all, and it's just the way she describes it and her writing style just brought this city to life, or this town to life, for me when I was reading this book. Now, when it comes to the magic, there's magical and mystical elements from the get-go of this book, and I actually found that I loved all of the magic in this book, and the sentient ships, the serpents, everything about it was so interesting and engaging. And even though we didn't learn much about it and we didn't get a lot of answers regarding it, it made me so curious to read on in Mad Ship and Ship of Destiny just to learn more about it, because I am so curious as to what is under the surface of, some of these things. My one con with the setting and the world building in Ship of Magic, though, is that while everything that's in this book is so well realized and well fleshed out, whether it be the characters or Bingtown or Jamelia, I honestly just want to learn more, and I want to see more and learn more about the magic and see more of the world and spend more time in the open sea and visit places like the Rain Wilds. And this is a book one of a trilogy, and I have no problem reading on and finding out, because I trust Robin Hobb and I trust her in how she develops her world, because I really think that the amount of time that she spends building this world and developing her characters and all of the magic and everything around it will have payoff, and I trust her in that. So I am very excited to read on in Mad Ship and Ship of Destiny, and just later on in the realm of the Elderlings, to find out and see more of these things. But that would be my con for Ship of Magic when it comes to the setting and the world building, just because, it felt a little bit contained in the actual area that we saw and experienced in this book, and I definitely wanted to see more. Tied up in the world building, though, and one of the most compelling aspects of Ship of Magic for me were the themes that were explored, because there was a lot, and they were about slavery and gender roles and class and social structure and so much more. And it was so fascinating to me because, honestly, no matter what you thought about a character, you could have all of the preconceived notions about a character that you could have. But the second that they have one line that is about one of these themes, whether it be slavery or the opposite gender or social structure or class or anything like that, that you agree with or disagree with, it can totally shift your viewpoint on that character, and you can become either incredibly attached to that character and really respect them, or you could absolutely hate them as a result of it. And this is totally up to you as a reader of what your internal biases are and how you align with what different people value in this book. And I just found this to be so interesting and compelling, and this was done in such a way that made it really engaging, and I just really enjoyed exploring a lot of these topics, and I'm very excited to see how these themes progress in Mad Ship and in Ship of Destiny. Now, do I think you should read Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb? Yes, 100%. I think this is such an unbelievably good book, and I think that while it definitely, she takes her time developing her characters and the world around them, it results in some incredibly well realized and well fleshed out characters and an unbelievably epic ending that is so captivating and engaging and made me so excited to read The Mad Ship. If you're a fan of nautical settings and pirates, or you're a fan of family dramas and complex characters, or you're just interested in the exploration of what happens when expectations go unmet and how people react to that type of situation, read this book. If you were a fan of the Farseer Trilogy, absolutely read this book. If you're a fan of the Farseer Trilogy, but you didn't really like Fitz, or you didn't really like the first person narrative or anything like that, read this book because you will love it. I think there is such a good chance that you will really find something about this book that you will really enjoy if you are a fan of any of those things. Because overall, I found Ship of Magic to be the perfect culmination of everything I've enjoyed about Robin Hobb's writing so far, but with more of everything. And we had more intrigue, more characters, more POVs, more mystery, more action, more adventure, and I just loved everything about this book, and I enjoyed my time with every single minute spent reading this book. Ship of Magic introduced me to some of Robin Hobb's most well-realized, well-fleshed-out characters that I have read from her yet, and every single minute of conflict and interaction between them that happened in this book had me so engaged and was so thrilling, and I enjoyed every single minute of time that I spent reading this book. And even though I missed Fitzchivalry Farseer and a lot of the characters that we know and love from the Farseer Trilogy, and I can't wait to return to that in the Tawny Man Trilogy, I have been proven by Robin Hobb that the time spent away from that is way more than worth it, because this was an outstanding book. The characters in here are so well realized, and I love all of them. And I'm so excited to read The Mad Ship and Ship of Destiny and just watch these characters develop and just see what happens, because I have a feeling that things are about to get very crazy. But with all that said, that is my review for Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. I hope you enjoy this video. I hope you enjoy this content. If you do, please think about subscribing, hitting that bell notification down below, hitting that like button. It helps me out, helps the channel out a lot, and I really appreciate it. But with all that said, I hope you guys have a fantastic day.